All right, our speaker this afternoon is a senior planner with the City of Wichita in the Planning Historic Preservation. She's also written some articles for American Bungalow magazine. Please help me welcome Kathy Morgan.
So you know who I am. Tell me, start at this table and tell me where you're from, because I know you all aren't from Wichita. So you're from McPherson, right?
I live in McPherson, but I don't work there.
Okay.
I was kicked out several years ago. But
I can understand that.
I am currently with Kingman County.
Okay. Okay. Wichita?
Marion County, out in Huntsville.
Okay. And in the back?
Here, Wichita, Keychild.
Okay. Wichita. What about this table?
Wichita.
Okay.
Hayesville.
Hayesville. Okay. Todd, you're
Wichita.
here?
Hayesville.
Hayesville. Okay. Well, I just wanted to know that so I could, you know, if you're from outside of Sedgwick County, I could address some of my comments to you. You know, the thing of it is, what you have to look at with examples that I'm going to show you how things work here in Wichita, they can work that same way out in the county, or I'm sorry, outside the county, in other counties in our area, and across the state of Kansas. So the programs that I'm going to talk to you about today are statewide. And so I had talked to Todd briefly, and yes, I was able to write 2 articles for American Bungalow magazine, and it was basically about our neighborhoods and what goes on in our neighborhoods. And the stronger our neighborhoods are, the higher the quality of life. You guys know this stuff about how those things affect property values. So we do have, you know, to a certain extent, preservation does affect property values, but the one thing that you have to think about there is there's a difference between cost and value. And my friend Donovan Ripkema, who is a nationwide real estate guru, he does stuff overseas and everything, and so I've known him for about 30 years. And there's a difference between cost and value. What something costs and then what something else will pay for it, the value, can be 2 very different things. So that's kind of the way it is with historic preservation. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background about why properties are listed or how they're listed. And in order to be eligible, there are 2 rules of thumb. It has to be at least 50 years old or older. So we're looking at now properties that were built in 1962 as to have met this 50-year guideline, and they can't have any significant alterations. So they need to pretty much have their original exterior material, no big additions, changing of number of stories, that type of thing. So pretty much in its original condition. How many of you are familiar with the KG&E building downtown Wichita? That building was recently listed in the state and national registers of historic places, and they're getting ready to do a redevelopment on that. They're going to, I can't remember how many units, but they're making apartments in there, high-end apartments, and they are taking advantage of the fact that that building is listed in the state and national register. So buildings get listed because of architectural styles, construction method, like log cabins. That would be a construction method with the wattle and daub and the logs and all of that. Association with significant persons. That's kind of like, you know, George Washington slept here type thing. And then association with events. I'm trying to think what we have. Okay, the Warehouse and Jobbers District in downtown Wichita, which most of you know is Old Town. That is an association with events, or what we call broad patterns in history, because that collection of buildings represents a time of growth in Wichita's history where they were a regional supplier of goods and services. And so that's why, because people will say, well, there's not much to see in Old Town. There's not that many buildings that are architecturally significant. Well, that's true, and it's because of its association with westward expansion, that regional trade node, that type of thing. It's not because the buildings were architect design or they're an unusual architectural style. And then the last one is archaeological sites. So below ground, I deal with things above ground. At any time, y'all can stop and ask me a question. So we're back to preservation and property values. Property values are locally driven. So does the listing increase the property value? Sometimes, yes. Sometimes, no. Would you agree that downtown Wichita in the commercial area, how many projects do we have going on right now? We've had, let me go back a couple of years. The Carnegie Library was redeveloped, and I'm going to have pictures on this to show you and numbers to give you. Carnegie Library, the Broadview Hotel, we have the Union National Bank at the corner of Broadway and Douglas that's going to become the Ambassador Hotel. Let's see, what else right in there? The Lux is right in there. The Wichita High School Apartments, those opened in December of 2010. It's on North Emporia, in the 300 block of North Emporia. There are a couple of apartment buildings in the 700 block of North Market right now that are just reopening they're listed in the National Register. So you can see how listing in the National Register has increased that property value because of the advantage of incentives available to help redevelop those properties. And that in turn then strengthens our property tax base for our local taxes. These two examples that I'm giving you, one of the things that happens is you need to increase awareness of these types of programs to property owners. So there's a huge education component to preservation. And so there's I just noticed the preservation uses, up the N went to the other line. Case study in Philadelphia. Well, Philadelphia has a rich history. People understand their history. And so seeing, in listed historic districts, 131% sales price increase over comparable housing stock in an unlisted district, you can understand that. You can see that the education component has really affected those property values. And in Texas, there are nine cities that they looked at the historically designated district, and you can see there it says there's an increase from between 5 and 20%. So it can have a positive effect on property values. So the incentives that I've been talking about are, number one, the federal historic income tax credit. Number two, the state historic income tax credit. And the third is local financial tax incentives, or not tax incentives, local funding incentives. And this is specific to Wichita. I don't know if Kingman County has anything like this, or Hayesville. You don't have any?
We don't have that.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about the federal tax credit first. So in order to take advantage of these incentives for the federal historic income tax credit, it has to be a certified historic property, and that means it's either a contributing structure in a listed district or it has to be an individually listed building, or the National Park Service can certify that it's eligible, and then the property owner has to get it listed within 30 months of having started that whole process. So, you know, generally it takes maybe 9 months to get state and national register listed here, and you know, when we go through the process here in Kansas. Only for-profit entities are available to take advantage of this tax credit. So it has to be an income-producing property. It can be an office building, it can be a retail, whatever, but it has to be income-producing. It could be an apartment building. The other thing is, because these are preservation-related, they must all meet the Secretary of Interior's standards for rehabilitation, and there's 9 things. Number 1, basic things, 3 basic things. You want to retain as much original material as possible. So we don't want you taking all the historic windows out and putting in vinyl windows. If you can't repair it, you replace it in kind. And third, you want to try and use the building for what it was originally used for, because that way you have less changes to it. There is a fee required to process this. If you can imagine getting $1 million rehabilitation application, it's based on the cost of the rehabilitation, is what those fees are. And there are certain steps to review. I assist some of the developers locally before they ever get the paperwork filed that goes to the State Preservation Office and then on to the National Park Service, just to kind of help them interpret what those Secretary of Interior standards mean when they're going in and having to upgrade HVAC systems, mechanical systems, that type of thing. For a federal tax credit, the rehabilitation has to be substantial, and by this they mean that it has to exceed the adjusted basis of the building. And you guys all know what the adjusted basis of the building. Good, I don't have to go through that. But so if my building costs $100,000 and I'm going to do a rehab, basically I need to put at least that much back into the rehabilitation of the building in order to qualify for the 20% federal historic income tax credit. And that credit can be applied to your tax liability. You can carry it forward 20 years and go back 1 on your federal income taxes. Another thing that's different about the federal tax rather than the state tax is that the owner has to hold that building for a period of 5 years once it's been put back in service. Otherwise, there's a recapture of 20% per year on the tax credit. So what we see a lot of times, the tax credit has to be used by the property owner. So what we see happen with some of these larger projects, they will create a limited liability partnership, and that limited liability partnership will have a 5-year life. And then there's a mechanism in that partnership that allows basically the investor partners to get out of the ownership of the property after the 5 years has completed, so that they can take advantage of the federal tax credit. And this helps projects in that, you know, maybe you have somebody that's a little bit cash poor. They can get an investor to come in with their money and exchange the historic tax credits for their cash flow. That's very simplistic. What do I want to say? Hope Inc., a nonprofit organization. They have the Virginia and the Navarre-Nokomis apartment buildings on North Topeka. 300, the Virginia is right there at the corner of Topeka and 3rd, and then the Navarre-Nokomis are just north of the St. James Episcopal Church. And they partnered with a for-profit entity to help them raise the cash to redevelop those apartment buildings. And those are affordable housing units. So preservation isn't about raising property taxes or property values to the extent that you regentrify the neighborhood. We're very careful about helping people stay in their neighborhood. So now we're on to the state tax credit. And in order to be eligible for the state tax credit, your building has to either be listed in the State Register of Historic Places or the National Register of Historic Places. So the federal tax credit, only National Register listed properties are eligible. And the reason I point that out is that we do have several state listed only buildings in Wichita and throughout the state. So at this point, they're only eligible to apply for the state historic tax credit. And that is 25% of the certified rehab costs. Certified rehab costs.
Why would anyone want to do that? Is there more regulation or more criteria to be on the National Register? Why would you do both?
The reason you would get only state listing is the building, in order to be listed, it has to have a high degree of integrity and historic context. Remember when I first said the rule of thumb was it had to be at least 50 years old and can't have had significant alterations. And then there's several other subcategories. One of the things that would prevent you from getting the National Register is that there's been significant alterations, but it can be listed at the state level because it has a very high degree of historic significance within the state. For instance, the Sedgwick County Ark Valley Lodge, where I can't remember what Sedgwick County offices are in there, but the Ark Valley Lodge up there just north of the courthouse, that's a state listed building only. And the reason for that is because the original structure was 3 stories. And the 3rd story, through a tornado, was taken off. And so during its period of significance, when the Ark Valley Lodge was active, it destroyed the building as it was during that period of significance. This gets really convoluted. But that's why it's listed in the state register as opposed to the state and national register. So, certified rehab costs, think about anything that's attached to the building. Paint on the walls, carpet on the floors, windows, repair of exterior cladding materials, roof, HVAC system, mechanical system, doesn't include your landscaping. So anything attached to the building, architect's fees, structural engineer fees, those are included in eligible costs. So there are some soft costs that are allowed. And the state historic income tax can be used on income producing or non-income producing. So I could register my personal residence, and then if I did any kind of renovation or maintenance to it, as long as I spent $5,000, I could qualify for the 25% state historic income tax credit. So this helps out residential properties, churches. Sedgwick County has used this program for the renovation of the old county courthouse to the tune of about $1.5 million was what the certified rehab cost on that is. the church, the African American Museum, they've done some interior things, and they're putting an ADA accessible ramp on the building, and that's about $250,000. So the county in the last year has done $1,750,000 in what we would call certified rehab expenses. There may be more than that, but $1.7 million is what's been certified. And so they can then, what's 25% of $1.7 million? Let's see, 250, yeah.
Just over 300,000.
Pardon?
A little over 400,000.
A little over 400,000. So they get a certificate from the Kansas Department of Revenue that says your project is certified and you've earned $400,000 in tax credits. That's dollar for dollar. And so the thing that's real nice about these is because the Department of Revenue certifies the tax credits, those can be sold dollar for dollar. The state tax credit can be transferred. And so we have people, companies, whatever, that will purchase Kansas income tax credits because, like Commerce Bank, they have tax liability in the state of Kansas. Who's another? Banks, Commerce is the one that's most active. That's why I remember that. Fidelity Bank, because they have offices in Kansas and Oklahoma. Insurance companies will purchase them. Any entity that has tax liability in the state of Kansas will purchase these tax credits. And generally, depending upon the amount, they will sell anywhere from 85 cents to 92 cents on the dollar. So the county has $400,000 in tax credits. And let's say I'm KLM Corporation and I have tax liability in the state of Kansas of, say, $500,000. I can make a contract through a bidding process, because remember, this is the county, to purchase their $400,000 in tax credits for, let's say, 90 cents on the dollar. It should be higher than that, but 90 cents. So work your math.
360,000.
How much?
360,000.
Okay, so I get, as a company, I get $400,000 worth of tax credits, which I then use dollar for dollar to relieve my tax burden in the state of Kansas. So that means I only have to come up with $100,000 hard cash. I made $40,000 on that deal, right? Are you seeing that as a company? The county then gets to put that back into their operating budget, or wherever they may put it. But that's how that works. You can transfer the state tax credit. There's no cap on the limit, the number of times you can utilize the state tax credit. As long as you spend a minimum of $5,000, you can qualify, you can apply for the state tax credit. The federal tax credit is predicated on the adjusted basis of the building, so you can see if, say it wasn't the county, say it was KLM Corporation that went in and spent $1.75 million on rehabilitation, that would up my adjusted basis of the building. So unless there was some kind of significant damage to that building, I wouldn't be able to go back and meet that substantial threshold for rehabilitation in that property. The state tax credit, you can do that. It's particularly good for homeowners because you can, painting your house, if you have one of these 1906 American Foursquare houses, the huge ones that we see along Topeka Emporia and in Park Place Fairview, that's like a $20,000 project if you do it correctly. even if you don't do it correctly and just buy the paint, you're gonna meet that $5,000 budget. So homeowners can utilize this to help maintain their properties. And so we see that going on in the Topeka Emporia Historic District, the Park Place Fairview, the Bidding Historic District. Those are our 3 residential districts in Wichita. Will you let me know if I'm going over time?
Sure.
Okay, we talked about this. Any entity can make application. We've had a couple of churches have used this. The Fairmount Congregational Church over on North Fairmount, they did a $100,000 project and redid the roof and some other things. So churches can use it, museums can use it. The Aviation Museum uses this. Our Sedgwick County Historical Museum uses this program. The state tax credits can be carried forward for 10 years. So you don't have to use them all at once. You can amortize them, federal over a period of 20, state over a period of 10. Again, these tax credits, you also have to meet the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation. There is a processing fee. If you qualify for the federal tax credit, you pay that processing fee. You don't pay 2. And then the other thing is, you get the work approved by the State Historic Preservation Office before you start the work. There's another tax credit. We don't see this used too often, but on buildings that were built prior to 1936, and that date happens to be there because in 1986, Congress passed this 10% federal rehabilitation tax credit. Instead of saying 50 years, has to be at least 50 years old, they put the date as 1936, and so that's still in the legislation. And so anything built prior to 1936, there again, it has to be substantial. You have to meet that adjusted basis. And it has to be income producing, but you cannot use it for apartment buildings. I don't think hotels qualify for this either. If you're already listed, either individually or as a contributing structure in a listed historic district, state or national register listed, you may not use this 10% rehabilitation tax credit. You have to, if you're going to get a tax credit, you have to use the appropriate historic tax credit program. Some of the basics of that is the retention, a certain percentage of the retention of exterior walls, interior walls, and structural framework. I think the only time I can remember that this was used is when we were doing the Eaton Block there along Emporia. There's the Lexington Hotel, and it had, I don't know, I think they demolished maybe 15 feet off the east end of the building. That building faces Emporia. So the back end of the building, they took 15 feet off so they would be able to have surface area for parking and, what do I want to say, systems for the building. And so that's the only time I'm aware of that we've used this here in town. And all this requires is that you claim it on your IRS form. So it doesn't have the same kind of documentation required that you do when you're doing a federal tax credit or a state tax credit. And there's no review process. I wouldn't get involved in a project like that. So that's between you and your accountant as to how you document that. So, to give you an idea as to what's going on, well, that looks odd. I'm sorry that's hard to read. It's hard for me to read. Commercial Historic Central Business District, and you can see Here is downtown, and this map is old, so it's not showing a couple of major projects that have happened in the last, well, the last one was the Broadview Hotel. So we have had, the state historic income tax credit was passed in 2001. Since 2001, we've had over $103 million in certified rehab costs occur in this area. And before 2001, there had been $20 million in federal rehab costs. So about $125 million worth of reinvestment in downtown. One of them, I mentioned the Carnegie Bank built, the library, Fidelity Bank. Their certified rehab costs in that building was $5 million. Have any of you been inside there? You need to treat yourself and go. They did an excellent job. And that's just the certified rehab costs. They probably spent an additional $1.5 million or $2 million to do the entire project.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
I don't know if you can answer, maybe Mike can. When these folks do these extensive renovations, does the county or the city have any type of a revitalization program where they would get a proration abatement on the increased value for a period of time?
There are some locations that do that. I don't know if this particular one, I don't believe this one is though.
It seems to me like we have a program where you get an abatement of 75% of the increment above the, what the tax base was before the project and what it is after completion, and that's a 5-year thing. And I don't exactly know, we also have the tax increment financing districts here in Wichita, but I don't know that that was involved in one of those tax increment districts. I don't know that, but that's another layer of financial incentives.
Is this on the tax roll? Or is it exempt?
Well, it was owned by the city, and I'm not sure what the current ownership is.
The Fidelity purchased it from the city before they did the rehab.
Probably deal with tax roll.
Yeah. And so before that, it was owned by the city, so it wasn't on the tax rolls.
But a lot of the other properties, like you talked about the Broadview, are owned privately, so.
Right.
So
But they did a $23 million rehab.
That would be on the tax rolls. So the rehabilitation, is that any, because in Kingman County, we have an NRP program.
It's just real small pockets that have been allocated.
Yeah. But even if it is within a program that is abated for a certain number of years, it's going to come out of that abatement and then they'll be taxed at the full value.
We don't apply that. Somebody else applies that, right? If they get an abatement on that, somebody else applies that. We just set the value. Correct?
Yeah, well, the IRB month that we use to do this will be in time.
Right. But we don't deal with that. I mean, we get the order saying this is exempt for X amount of years. We just set the value.
Right.
Yeah.
The amounts that we
The
are
NRP
exempt.
programs work to where it's progressive. For the first, for example, in Kingman County, for the first 3 years, you may get 95%. And then the next year, you may get 85%. So we have to physically calculate in our office
Oh, you guys.
each year and then give that number to a clerk.
Ours is a lot simpler.
Pardon?
Ours is simpler. We pay basically whatever the market value is, and if it has an exemption, I go back to the individual exemption and see how it reads. There's never two that are issued exactly the same way.
Well, he's talking about a different program.
Yeah. This isn't.
We have the same thing in Sedgwick. There's just
Pardon?
We have the same thing in Sedgwick County, but they're just small areas.
But I mean, you're talking a lot of money.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing, that's recognized because there isn't a city or county in the United States that doesn't do this type of thing and then have some kind of abatement or reduce taxes or whatever, but it always sunsets. But the thing of it is, it's certainly going to elevate that property tax significantly to what it was before the rehab. And it generates more tax dollars. I know that's not, that impacts assessing values to some extent, well, the mill levies anyway.
My
So,
major concern is just how you
yeah.
work with the market value on something like that. If it's at $23 million worth of work coming to it, I mean, that's,
Well, and you have to understand, that's labor and materials, so you take out, and preservation activities, I handed you out something I just pulled off the internet, 12 economic benefits of preservation, and you have to understand that preservation is labor intensive. 60 to 70% of project costs are going to be labor, whereas if it's new construction, it's flipped. New construction is going to be 60 to 70% materials, and so how that equates into your valuation of the property. Anyway, the Brown Building here at the corner of that's Broadway and Douglas also, and you can see all of this was changed so that it was interior and exterior. This was the major exterior renovation, was restoring the historic storefront. The Eagles Lodge over by Ray Sales Grocery, how many of you remember it looking like this? And this is an $830,000 rehab, federal and state tax credit utilized on that. Yeah. The Kaufman Building down on South Market, this storefront had been totally removed and it was plaster. And this project was done, I want to say like 2005 or 2006, and they restored the storefront. And this is one of those cases where this is estate listed only. And they were able to get the tax credit because they removed the non-historic storefront and reproduced something that would have been appropriate for that time period of the significance of that building. This is one of my favorite ones, the Keep Clean building at 3rd and Rock Island. I can read this word. Yeah, 3rd and Rock Island. And it was an old laundry, steam laundry. That's how it began its life. And John Belford of Belford Electric purchased, he was bought out by the county for the arena, and so he purchased this building and did a tax credit rehabilitation, $350,000 interior and exterior, and that's what it looks like now. And so, you know, you can see how, if nothing else, a change in appearance will spur other property owners within proximity to fix up their buildings. There's a little building north of that. It was an old oil field machinery related warehousing building that's just recently been purchased, and that's being redeveloped now. So fun projects. Apartment projects. The Stoner apartment at 9th and Market, very dilapidated. Interfaith Ministries purchased that block of properties and they redid this apartment building, and that is used for affordable housing. And I want to say there's 12 or 16 units in there. Here's your Wichita High School, 64 units. They opened those units to the market December 1st of 2010, and by the end of the first month in 2011, they were all leased. And that's,
so that's an apartment building now, is that what you're saying?
And it retains the character of the school building, public spaces, the hallways, the entry areas. The classrooms were made into apartments. That's just like Sunnyside School over here on East Douglas and Kellogg School, or East Douglas, East Kellogg. Those two school buildings are being, Sunnyside is open now. They just had an open house on the 26th. Kellogg Elementary should be nearing completion soon. And those are both historic income tax credit projects. Here's one of our residential historic districts. This is the Topeka Emporia Historic District. And this outline is the state and national register part of it. So you can see those blue dots indicate properties, houses, residential units that they have utilized the state tax credit to the tune of $5.4 million in rehab costs since 2001. The Mullen Court Apartments, that's another affordable unit. Those were in bad shape. The police were called there daily because of drug-related activities and so forth. $3.25 million. And I haven't heard of any problems with drug-related activities going on since it was rehab. They aren't affordable in the sense that they're part of, they meet certain federal housing regulations. Section 8. They aren't Section 8. But these units they're market rate. That's what I'm trying to say. There's a good portion of these that are market rate. Huh?
They're not subsidized.
Right, they are not subsidized. There might be I believe there's a certain percentage in that building that are, but it's not entirely affordable like the Stoner apartment was that I showed. This is Fairmount Apartment over on North Fairmount, just south of WSU. $500,000 rehab, 12 units. He had projected, 6 months to lease those up, and they were leased within 6 weeks. Stouffer Apartments on East Douglas, $300,000. Those were, I don't remember how long it took those to get leased, but this type of housing in Wichita is gone. When I went to the open house for Sunnyside School, they had 6 units already leased and people living in them, probably within a couple of weeks of having started marketing the units. This is the Park Place Fairview Historic District, North 13th Street North to 18th Street. LW Clapp House is the big house is up there at the top. So you can see the number of rehabs that have taken place, and that's almost $1 million in certified rehab costs. There's the LW Clapp House, $400,000. That had been in disrepair for a while, and they went in and made some changes back to what would have originally been inside the house. The Mark Clapp House just south of that, if you can imagine taking care of those clay tile roofs, that can get to be pricey. College Hill neighborhood. You know, most people think College Hill is a historic district, but it is not. It does have properties in there that would qualify, but only these places where the blue dots are actually listed properties that have taken advantage of the state tax credits. There's probably, I can think of 5 more that aren't on there that are listed, but that's pretty much it in College Hill. The RDW Clapp House on North Belmont, that has a slate roof, and so they had a major repair of that and zoning of HVAC systems, so $170,000 on that one. Our smallest residential district is the bidding district between 10th Street and the bridge. And this is just a pie chart to show you the numbers that I've been talking about. That salmon color is the commercial that's been occurring in downtown. The light green is multifamily. It's all those purpose-built apartments. This is your single-family residence house, and these are the civic buildings. Particularly the county is the one that is responsible for those civic building investments. Now, you as a tax assessor, there are these databases. I'm sure you guys are, I'm going to go to the GIS, Wichita GIS first. I'm sure you guys are familiar with this. But I want to show you the type of information I can give you here. So let's see an address I know that's listed. Okay, let's just do the Clap House. Let's see, that's 1847 Wellington. Okay, so here's 1847. If you go over here to this custom button and you come down under zoning and you click historic sites, historic districts, environs doesn't mean much to you. What that means to me is that properties that show up in that area are within 500 feet of a state or national register listed property, and for purposes of state law, it requires a review by my office whenever they do anything to it. They aren't eligible for tax credits, so I'm not going to turn that on. So now I just need to refresh. So you see here, that's showing that that property is listed, that cross-hatching. This direction means that it's listed in the state and national register, and if you see this one, it's cross-hatched the other way. That means it's listed locally in our Wichita Register of Historic Places. But this whole area is within a state and national register listed historic district. So this property would be treated the same as this property that's individually listed, because it is a contributing structure within a listed district. So you can find that type of information on your GIS map, particularly if you are doing something in areas of town that were built pre-1960, because this type of information I update every time a property is listed. The VA hospital was recently placed in the National Register. So that's now got the cross-hatching over that parcel of land. Let's see, is there anything else I can tell you on here? To me, that's the big thing. And then if you want to know more about that property, you can certainly call my office and ask me. Another fun thing is this KHRI is a statewide database. And you don't have to, have login privileges. Let's see, we can search it for, okay, I was just going to do that. Kingman. Okay, that's all I'm going to put in there is Kingman, so that it'll show me everything that's been surveyed in Kingman. So see, you're wrong. Was I nasty about that?
I'm shocked.
Okay.
They're on the register?
They've been surveyed. So let me, let's see, how can I...
Oklahoma Hotel?
Let's see. I need to go over here. How do I get over Okay. So over here, this column says, is it yes or, these two spaces, this is National Register, this is State Register. So this one is listed in the State and National Register. So that's the third line from the top. It's in Kingman. It's the Donnie Clark House at 817 West Sherman Street is listed in the State and National Register. The other information that you're getting on here, it just says that these have been surveyed. Is it listed? No, no. Is it eligible? This one says no. So that means it must have some significant alteration to it or something, so it wouldn't be eligible for listing. But, you know, down here's one that's listed as, yes, it's potentially eligible. It's a commerce trade, it's a gas station at 485 West D Avenue. So if that property owner knew about these tax credit programs, they could elect to get the property listed and take advantage of that. Wait a minute. Yeah, I want to close tabs. Yes.
Those owners would have had to done something though to precipitate this, would they have not?
To precipitate
Getting
listed?
Getting listed and or getting a survey done and see if
The
it's
survey,
qualified.
no. The survey you don't have to. I conduct these types of surveys in Wichita. You know, we just completed one in 2010. A bunch of the properties south of Kellogg from the river over to Santa Fe, down to Morris, some 400 properties. And we filled out survey forms saying the condition of the house, what kind of house, what type it was, what architectural style, all that kind of information. So that doesn't require property owner permission, but to get listed, it does require property owner permission.
So you researched these houses and these buildings to see if there was any historic happenings.
Well, you know what I do is I use the city directories. I use, there's an index to the Wichita papers from 1872 through 1980. It's called the Tian